Welcome to another episode of A Dram with Friends. I am really excited to welcome Dr. Currie Myres into the pub. And I'm going to start with the Irishman whiskey as Dr. Currie, welcome.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be on. Thanks so much. And you picked a good bottled uncork there.
Yes, I listened to your heroic stories interview, and you talked about sipping these once in a while with a priest as you
Yeah.
found your way into the Catholic Church. So that is a different type of RCIA than most of us are accustomed to.
Yeah, it was a great story. It's part of my conversion story. I had gone through. Um, uh, I was agnostic for most of my life. I started out as a Methodist and really didn't connect at all. But I became agnostic after I really got into law enforcement. And I worked some difficult cases, and I worked deep undercover. And as you know, you see a lot of things, in that line of work that sometimes doesn't prepare you, and you become something you're not. Too, when you are taking on those sobriquets of being somebody else. And it's a difficult time. And then when I got out of that, I went into the homicides and worked death investigations, and that didn't make it any better, but at least I was kind of able to look like a cop again. But
Yeah,
yeah, but I
that's
mean, the story with Father Cullen, who was a jovial Irish Catholic priest, is I had actually gone through our CIA completely, totally ready to, get go through the process of entering the church, and I said I just wasn't called, and I didn't do it. And I later on, after God spoke to me, that's when I went up to Father Cullen, and he was very kind to me to not make me jump through hoops and go through RCIA again. He knew that I had gone through it, and he said, "How about if we just talk and spend time together?" And for about 3 weeks, we met a couple of times a day. And you know how busy priests are. I mean, they're
yeah,
always busy. They're always doing something late at night. They're answering calls. There's everything, deaths and trauma and all that stuff that they have to deal with. And he made the time. Sometimes he had a conflict and we did it the next day, but he always had time for me, and we'd sit down with a good scotch or an Irish whiskey and occasionally a cigar. And we talked. And that's how I came into the church.
so which one's your favorite whiskey? Is it Irish, Scotch?
Well, I like them both. I mean, you can't go wrong with many of my favorite scotch is monkey shoulder. I don't know if you ever heard of monkey shoulder. It's a
Yeah, I've got a bottle over there
yeah, it's
on
I
the bar.
that's probably my go-to if I'm drinking. And if you virtually any Irish whiskey, works for me. So I really don't have any druthers there or any particular one, because all of them are pretty good.
Yeah. The first sip of this one has been quite tasty. I just want to talk about one of I fi- I did 33 and a half years of law enforcement,
Yeah,
and it was when I started, and I had three young kids at the time. And that's where I needed to know more about what I believed, because just exactly what you talked about, what you see out there's a whole lot of gray.
oh yeah,
and and what am I going to tell my kids what's right and wrong, right? Because
yeah,
you go into all kinds of situations where they're saying, oh no, he's wrong, or I'm wrong, or you know what I mean. So
yeah.
it's it was for me, that was the start of that deeper searching of what do I teach my kids. uh
Yeah.
so
Yeah, for
what do
me,
you
I have a similar story. I spent 24 years on, and I started out as a state trooper, and then became a special agent with what's called the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. And I know we have some differences from Canadian law enforcement to United States law enforcement. And during that time period, I spent 5 years on the DEA task force in Kansas City. And then the final portion of my career, I ran for sheriff of. You don't have sheriffs up in
No,
Canada,
no.
but we have a lot. We have sheriffs in America. They're elected positions. They're very important people in offices in America, and they're there to be protectors of the Constitution. And I ran for sheriff, and I ended up being sheriff of a major county sheriff's office in the Midwest. I had nearly 1,000 employees in a population of 650,000. So it was a very large sheriff's office, and we had, two big detention facilities. The inmate population was about 1,500, and we did it all. We did everything, not only policing investigations. We had our own crime lab, state of the art crime lab, which rivaled a lot of state crime labs. It was a wealthy county. It's a economic engine there in the Midwest. So, and it's in the Kansas City metropolitan area. And so I was very blessed to do that. But you're right. I think, but the one thing about our profession is that it's easy to get up into kind of cognitive biases
Mm-hmm.
because we spend 95% of our time dealing with 5% of the population. And it's just the opposite for the general public. And we see things so much that, I mean, I think there's been studies to show that an average law enforcement officer has thousands of cascade events on evil or high stress situations that affect the mind. And the average person may be lucky, well, unlucky, but they may only have a couple in their in their life where they
Yep.
have the similar situation, unless you were in the military, of course. And not all military have that. I mean, some people are fighters and some people are logistics, and
Yep.
law enforcement's is similar. There's some. I served in work and projects that kind of put me in, and not all law enforcement sees those things, but I happen to like it. I like the danger associated with it, and um, I like what I did. Every agency that I worked for, I absolutely loved. And so I have this kind of juxtaposition where I absolutely was loved what I did. I felt like I was serving something greater than myself. But here I was, this agnostic that had not been in touch with faith. And when I say agnostic, I did believe in God. I believe that Jesus was real, but from a religiosity point of view, I just, it just none of it was do anything any for me because it's made up of humans, and I saw humans as being inherently bad and lying and all those things that helps cloud our judgment
Yeah.
as well.
And I guess that's where I was blessed to, because you're right. We do. I worked the streets for better part of 20 years, so they're not calling you often to because people are being good.
Yeah.
Uh, although we're we tried to be a more community based service where you did go into the schools or so you tried to have those positive interactions with the community so that there's that buildup of trust. And so I did a lot of work in that area, but yeah, I was dealing with a lot of the bad stuff, as you say, and just building that trust with the community. And that's one of the areas that I see down south, the issues like you talk about the sheriff's office, and you had all this, and there's a lot of silos in that model that is the US, where here we were trying to break down some of those silos, even with working with I I started up two projects, youth at risk and identity based wraparound intervention, where I was working with youth at risk of falling into gangs
Mhm.
and going down to some of the symposiums down in the States. Like, they couldn't even wrap their mind around working with a police officer working with a social worker full time.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. There's two different breed of cats there that you're talking about. American law enforcement. Of course, I'm fond of it because that's what I'm used to, and
Yeah.
every country thinks their country's got kind of the
Yeah.
better system, but Americans are by in its our history is founded on being suspicious of the government. It's what Americans are.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the reasons that we have many different types, we have local, state, and even in local, we have police departments and we have county sheriffs. And at state, we could have, some states have a state police, other states may have a highway patrol and a bureau of investigation, and they're two separate. And they're actually, one might be under the governor, another might be under the attorney general. And then there's, of course, the federal government. And the federal government, as you know, at least in the United States, they don't have complete jurisdiction to do anything. They have certain, Title 1811 type responsibilities and things that they have to focus on. So the FBI has certain things that they can do. They're probably the broadest. DHS, who was recently formed right after 9/11. They have more broad powers, but you get to DEA and ATF and Secret Service. Their enforcement capabilities are a little bit more narrow. But in general, Americans wanted it that way because there's divisions of power, and it's if one gets out of hand or one becomes unethical or if there's problems, then you can rely on the other. And that was one of the reasons why the sheriff became such an important position in the United States. Is it was it was a person of the people and responsible to the people. You could be voted in or voted out, of
Yeah.
course, as a result. But it was one, and the sheriff more has probably a heightened awareness when it comes to what the community may want and need. So um, all the things you talked about, I didn't do as much as a state trooper. I did speak at schools and things like that because they had troopers, but I mainly worked midnights. I was on motors for a couple of years. So I rode motors in the Kansas City area and then worked midnights. And midnight in an urban sector on a major interstate, you're arresting a lot of felons that are traveling, not only, 10 or 15 miles to commit crimes, but they're international, they're transnational and everything else that you run into. And certainly as a KBI agent, I was out working homicides and, public corruption and police shootings and things like that. And it wasn't until I really became sheriff is where I started to do a lot more interaction with the community, just because of the type of position that it
Yeah.
is. You have to be in tune with you got to listen to your community or you're going to find yourself on your way out pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And that's where, well, even when I started policing, uh, we had the information floor, the secret stuff, and like we were all there was a section working on crim, organized criminal, uh and but they wouldn't talk to each other because information is power, right? If I know
Oh,
something that you don't, and then yeah, then it's my beef. And but my my way of thinking is that just helps the bad guys get away if we're not sharing information with each other. I was a big proponent because when I started, I was working heavily with the Vietnamese gangs and arresting them and some of the, but I'd always share the information up the chain and where we'd have. I remember one in particular where it was a home invasion. I was on days off and uh, robbery. As soon as I got back, like they were phoning me on my days off, trying to get information. Within an hour of me hitting the street, I had all the suspects under arrest, just because I knew who they were, and that's where it's so important to in the what I'm doing now in working with different ministry of men, like we've got to pull together if we're ever going to change the culture that we're in. The ministry to men have to find the best practices, and tried to do a lot of that in law enforcement. My specialty was uh, crowd management, and I was riot squad or whatever you want to call it for
Right.
17 years. Where G8 and all those things were at the end I was training. And then the other thing that I got involved in and did for 19 years was peer support training for when you're in those officer involved shootings, or you have the death of one of your coworkers, or you're in a critical incident, uh, where you have mechanisms for dealing with that in a healthy manner.
Yeah.
Like we just had a school shooting here where 10 or 9 are dead, I think,
Yeah.
and uh, and I'm praying for those first responders because
No, absolutely. Yeah.
that's hell to go into.
Yeah, it is. And we're so much better than what we used to be. It used to be, it's totally different if you were involved in the shooting, probably prior to 2000,
Yeah,
compared to today. I was in the 1993 federal building shootout and bombing incident in Topeka, Kansas in 1993. And, uh, I was lucky to survive that, but basically the next day it was just like, it's okay. It's time to go back to work. And there wasn't really, I did my interviews with the FBI because they came in to do the crime scene investigation, and then the following day I was back working again, and it wasn't good because I have probably had that kind of low level PTSD or operator syndrome ever since, and just because you incorporate that with everything else that you see as a result. So I'm truly trying. I'm with you. I'm truly trying to not only be a representative of being a good father and dad and man, but also in particular, I have an interest in working with first responders because I know the struggles that they go to. And when it comes to mental health, and I don't know if you would agree or not, but there's a lot of police officers, even when you have mental health programs, don't want to take it because of the stigma that's associated with those mental health programs. At least it's that way in the States, where there's just that kind of stigma. You might be concerned whether maybe a defense attorney learns it and could use it against you in court, or all those kinds of things. You're suspicious, at least we are sometimes, of, does it go into your file? Does it, can you really share what you feel? Is the administration going to, find out if you said something about them? Is it kind of get back to them? So there's a lot of that kind of suspicion that can go with the traditional mental health practices.
yeah, and you're absolutely right, and I don't have the statistics backing me up right now, but I do remember that that's why peer support was more effective than going to professional help, as it were, because it's not that stigma where you and I getting together, having a coffee, a beer, and just letting you talk through it, uh, is extremely powerful. And it would, you'd probably remember the incident. It was that McDonald's massacre in, I think it was San Diego, that was kind of an impetus to start looking at that. How do we deal with first responders? Because I believe it was something like 4 of the first responders that went to the McDonald's massacre ended up committing suicide,
Mm-hmm.
because they're not getting the help. And and yeah, and I remember one of the old homicide detectives who had moved into arson, and it was a house fire where 2 little girls died just before Christmas, and I'm the sergeant, so I invite them to join us for a critical incident stress debriefing. And he had never done anything like that with
Mm-hmm.
all the crap he did had to deal with as a homicide detective for years.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. And my dad was on the service where they went for a beer and drank it away as
Yeah.
best they could, right?
Yeah. That was pretty much that was us early on. I mean, after there was quite a few incidents where we just went to the bar after, the next day. But after the federal building shootout, I went to a bar that night because a guy just said, "Hey, let's go to the bar and just you know, kind of just recollect our thoughts." And so
Yeah.
we did, and that was a typical normal thing to do. As a result, probably still is today. I'm not saying that you can't, seek help, but you just got to be careful, about those kind of depressants. And then all of a sudden you get, you get in a position where you're doing it too much. But
Yeah.
it's the good part is, as you know, there's so many good men and women, and always have been, in law enforcement, and there's many of them even prior to having these official programs. There were so many of them that would just say, "Hey, are you doing okay?" They would kind of be that unofficial,
Yeah.
an old timer kind of coming up to you and say, "Hey, kid, you all right? You know,
Yeah.
if you want to talk or something, let me know." And that was kind of the end of it. But at least they recognized that something specific, happened to you, and can you, if you want, if you need me, I'm there. A lot of times we didn't follow up with it, but it was nice to hear that, reinforcement, especially from the older guys, that you used to work with, that you looked up to.
Yeah. And hopefully, yeah, as older guys, we carry a little bit of wisdom, like, and I did train a lot of the our guys out over the years, and they did appreciate, maybe not always at the time, but they appreciated some of the advice I gave them, whether it's working the street or how to treat the criminal, because that's the hardest thing for, well, not as a Christian, seeing the face of Christ in
Mhm.
everyone you meet, because sometimes you got to look real deep. And
Yeah,
but
that's the
that
first thing I do when I teach students. I had been dean of a school of justice studies in Rasmussen University for a few years after I retired, and then I spent 14 years at Benedictine College in the criminology department. And I just retired from that position, and I'm really trying to focus on Catholic apologetics now. And I do want to specifically reach out to first responders, and I write a lot and do podcasts a lot on myself on those particular issues we're facing. But for me, it was having the ability to talk to somebody. But I noticed, without a faith, for me, not having a faith life really did not allow me to, handle it the right way. So I'm trying to, tell police officers today, you got to, we focus a lot on mind and body,
hmm
um, because we want to look, in good shape and those kinds of things when we're on the job, and we want to try to educate ourselves in different ways, but we forget about that spirit side of us, to make sure that we're staying God centered in our approach. And it really wasn't until I started having more friends that were in my church community, in my parish community, than I finally had in law enforcement. Because before, it would be 90% cops and, maybe 10% of just the average Joe. But it wasn't until I really started hanging out with 90% average Joe people in our parish, and 10% cops. Not that I didn't not want to associate. I just, we try to do family things together, because in law enforcement, the family stuff gets harder. You end up doing things more just individually with them. And it was one of the reasons that my conversion occurred, is because I talk about charisms, the importance of charisms. And when I speak around the country, and the charism of hospitality had a specific role in the conversion of my faith. I was welcomed at many, Father Colin, who welcomed me into the church and did it in such a way that was great hospitality. My wife, God bless her, the patience of being in union with each other as married man and woman for 14 years, and and being lost, um, and her patience and her hospitality to not, why haven't you joined the church? Why aren't you doing this? Or, now what I did do is, I did promise when we got married that we would raise the kids Catholic, and I would go to mass with them and sit in the pews. So at least I did that. but I didn't consider myself Catholic at the time. I just considered myself, I'm going there to support my family.
That's awesome. Yeah, and yeah, I'm not sure if your wife's like mine, where she has not encouraged any of our kids to follow in my footsteps, just because 20 years of shift work and yeah, it was and it does change you per se. Although I was blessed, like I said, to get a visit from the Holy Spirit earlier
Mm-hmm.
in my career, and it became a vocation for me that I'm there as God's representative to these people. And he's you know what, you know why you're at this call, because God wants you to be there, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And and I was, at the time when I was going through this, my partner was a Dutch Reform and looking at the Catholic Church. So I he was challenging me, which helped me understand my faith better. That apologetics that you talk about, and
yeah.
we'd be working night shift listening to Scott Hahn tapes and
Oh
Jeff
yeah,
Cavins and Steve Wood
yeah,
and uh, racing to calls to break up fights at the bar, and
yeah. I'm seeing
it
Scott and
was,
his wife this
I
weekend.
was very
So
blessed in my
yeah,
career. All
yeah,
right,
yeah.
I'll
I feel the same way.
please
Yep.
say hi, and
Yeah, he's
I actually
speaking
got a
at
picture.
my wife is the director of religious education at a parish here in the Kansas City area, and they have Scott and his wife coming in to speak, and so I'm going to be there and kind of help out and get a chance to say hi to them. So it's going to be wonderful. So they have kind of a connection back here in Kansas City, and of course with Benedictine College and
Yeah,
things like that. So it's that they happen to we're blessed because they can come into town occasionally to be able to see
uh,
family
I
and that.
I got a picture in uniform with Kimberly at EWTN Studios when I was doing some shows down there back in
Oh,
the
nice.
that was early 2000 when I got a picture with her. And then I met Scott at a family conference up here. His son plays rugby, so I talked a little bit because I coached rugby at the high school, and
Mhm.
he he's good friends with Jeff Cavins, and I'm good buddies with Jeff. So uh,
Nice. Yeah, he's
yeah,
another real blessed guy. So yeah,
oh yeah, yeah. And that's where it's hard to believe. You know, here I was a street cop, and it was down. We had it was four police officers that started up the God Squad because we saw the need for fathers to step up, because the kids we were arresting didn't have dads in the home, or the prostitutes, or
yeah,
and so we started our first men's conference. We're coming up on our 29th annual next month, and then Steve Wood had us down doing TV shows at EWTN. And I look back and I'm going, I had no business being there, as but God calls you
yeah,
to
absolutely. That's awesome. And you not only that, but you listen. You know,
yeah.
some people forget to listen to those to his voice and discern correctly.
Well, and you talk about charisms, and I'll have to introduce you to Bishop Scott McCaig, who's our keynote for this year's conference and a good buddy. He just wrote a book on charisms
Hmm.
recently, and he's so I'm looking forward to learning a bit more about that in our conference, and that unlocking those tools. Just like I say, we had, when I do talks, we had lots of tools on our tool belt when we were police officers, but the best one was the mouth and what I said, and was able to uh, bring the situation down, right? So,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and
God's given every one of us at least one charism, sometimes more,
yeah,
but God's given every one of us a special. And a lot of people don't know what they are. You know, some people, and it may not be something that you like or do every day. You know, I was a professor, so that means you would think teaching would be, my particular charism, and I scored pretty high on it when you do if you're going to really um, St. Catherine of Siena Institute focuses
Yeah.
on charisms, and I went through their program when I was discerning at different charisms that I had, and I scored pretty high on teaching, but it wasn't really what I should be considering to do. So it really ended up becoming more about wisdom and evangelization, and that led me into Catholic apologetics, and it's been a wonderful time period, and it's been, I was a Catholic probably for close to 20 some years before I even got to this level. So I became a Catholic, and it's almost, I think you said, for me it was almost like I had a kind of a reconversion while I was in the faith. On now I have to take it to another level.
That's awesome. So, is there a dish that you prepare that keeps the family coming back to the table? Do you have a specialty?
Well, my wife is an excellent cook, but so she does most of the baking, and there are some things like her fried chicken and meatloaf. It's phenomenal, so she cooks those. But I do most of the cooking, and we're also, there's some gluten allergies in our house, so we have to. I don't have them, but we have to pay attention to that kind of stuff and eat very, very, very well,
Yeah.
and pick out the right kind of things. So I like experimenting, and and it could be something different every day. But the easiest things to do is just even a good breakfast and homemade pancakes that are gluten free, or that's the little things. I mean, who can turn down a steak? Just the simple thing is a wonderful. My son-in-law and daughter own a pretty large wagyu cattle ranch in
Wow.
in central part of Kansas. So every once in a while, I get to go out and pretend like I play cowboy, although I don't. I just usually watch my son-in-law doing something. But getting that kind of high quality beef that you could literally cut with a fork can change your life when it comes to taking
Oh
tasting
yeah.
tasting steak. And I'm from Kansas City, so barbecue. I'm always on the smoker. I'm always smoking something. So
Yep.
everything from
Yeah.
smoked salmon to chicken to beef to pork, whatever it may be. Um,
I think you and I would get along great. I'm so my kids for our 25th wedding anniversary, they did the a little skit or song, whatever, about Arthur the Aardvark had a song. My dad's a chef. You think that's great? Just try and guess what's on your plate. And because yeah, I just grab what's there and create something, and
yeah.
it's a great outlet.
I
So
love I love my family. I mean, I'm a hugger and things like that. So, and I tell people I love them. So that's not. But I think for my family, the one of my love languages, I think, is cooking for them. I mean,
yeah,
I love doing it. It isn't an imposition at all.
well, we started up barbecue outreach as a ministry here, and
Yeah.
so and I have competed at the barbecue competitions in the past. It was when I was a police officer, and I do the lunches for the district, and they got me to compete, so I started competing and did fairly well because you're competing against teams from all over, and
Oh
because the
yeah.
winner of that one, it was an equivalent to a state championship, so
Mhm.
the winner of that one got entry into the Kansas Royal.
Oh
And
wow. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so
It's
yeah.
literally 15 minutes from my house.
Oh wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's on the bucket list to get to one of these years, but
Yeah.
so one of the things I ask my guests in this season is, what wisdom do you have for other men, especially our younger men who are at a loss for where they belong and what is a man? So
Oh boy, that's such a great question, and the answer part of it is in society right now, manhood and being a man has been belittled so much by we live in a time of social contagions. I speak about that as a lot as an applied criminologist, where we have this. I wrote a book called The Advent of Feral Man, which talks about the new criminal archetype that we're seeing that's fueled by these social contagions and untreated mental health. We have in the States, we have a huge untreated mental health problem. Most of them is not, it's not homelessness. It's just people who live on the streets because they're addicts or have serious mental health problems that aren't being treated.
Yep.
And then you get into the dark psychological traits and the narcissism and Machiavellianism and unfortunately in some cases sadism that's been occurring. And I think right now the devil used to hide some and try to sneak around. I don't think he and his minions are hiding anymore. We're beginning a battle on good versus evil, in my opinion,
Mhm.
because we're seeing it in the kind of criminal that we see now that was much different. And we're seeing a lot of it fueled, through anarchy and social media and all those things that we're kind of experiencing, at least in the States. But you also see it worldwide
Yeah.
in many different areas. So the first thing is when you say you're a man or talk about manly things or being a true man, the immediate reaction by some is that of skepticism and why are you mansplaining or whatever the terms are that they try to put you into a hold. So I get it, because we have this pressure to be nothing and to and to feminize manhood, and that's the devil. Men and women are different, and by the way, there are two sexes, men and women, and so men and women are
Bold
different.
statement.
Yeah, and they are different. But I think that when I talk about this in kind of one of the talks that I do is often when we eat and do barbecue and eat a steak, and it's kind of the Iron Forges Iron
Yep.
leadership series that I do, and it's about getting in tune with who we are. And the best way to get in tune with who we are is understand the importance of Saint Joseph. Saint Joseph is my hero. Um, he has never written anything. You're not going to see anything from Scripture about Saint Joseph, but I truly think that God, uh, when He picked Saint Joseph to be His earthly father, He picked a person of a certain mental capacity, a certain spiritual capacity, a certain physicality. And he was, in my opinion, one of the first Delta Force operators or Navy SEALs or whatever you want to call it. This guy mission was to take care of our mother and to take care of his earthly son, Jesus Christ. And he protected them and was one step ahead of Herod the whole way. He led him through the desert and back. He is the excellent example of formation. He taught Jesus. He taught Jesus not only the Jewish faith and how to be a good person of faith and how to treat people and how to treat women, but he also taught his earthly son skills like carpentry skills and others. And he's the perfect example of formation. So a litany to Saint Joseph, understanding Saint Joseph and having a free discussion about how important Saint Joseph I think, is one of the most important things that you can do. And I think also for men, we shouldn't be afraid to talk about the beauty and truth. Um, uh, that's kind of a Baltazarian approach. Uh, Baltazar
Sorry,
was, yeah.
yeah, I'm laughing here because just so people know, this is not a paid for advertisement. He's
I
probably
didn't. If I did, I didn't get paid. What's up with that?
uh, so Saint Joseph has been central to our mission for 29 years, and and we commissioned the Litany of Saint Joseph in
Oh,
song to show off the truth and beauty
oh my
of.
goodness. Yeah,
So
that's pure.
please,
Yeah,
please go on heroicmen.ca or on the Heroic Men app and look for the Litany of Saint Joseph, and sit down, turn up your speakers, and sit with your wife. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece. Like, it was something else to be at the concert last March when we did it live, and
yeah,
because you don't know what you're going to get when you commission something like that, right? Like,
yeah,
but you were talking about, to me, you were talking about Saint Joseph Terror Demons, the Delta Force, Saint Joseph,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
so you'll, I think you'll really enjoy that part of the concert.
Yeah, and
Uh,
Saint Joseph, has many different titles, but
yeah,
that's the one I definitely connect with. And so I mean that's so cool that but it makes total sense, right? I mean, it's just a natural thing to say, well, Saint Joseph, my goodness, he was the protector of his family. He is the protector of families. He's the protector of the domestic church and so many other different titles. And it's just so important to, and there's nothing like intercessory prayer. My wife, unbeknownst to me at the time, and kids, my wife alone, and then as we had kids, and we have five now, did the litany to St. Jude during my time of being um, agnostic. Um, and that had a major impact on me, especially after I found that out. And I have a special place in my heart for St. Jude as a result. I think for men, Sean, one of the things that we forget to do is forgive ourselves.
yeah.
And you might say that, well, we're Catholics, we go to confession, and we're supposed to confess our sins, and then we're forgiven for those sins. But there are many of us, and I was one, that even after confession, I had a hard time forgiving myself for past indiscretions or past sins or whatever they may be. And until you realize that God takes all that Christ takes all that, and he consumes all that evil that you've had, any kind of sin that you had, and you accept his forgiveness and accept his love that way, with that forgiveness, that it can actually change who you are. And then all of a sudden, when you go to work, you are what you were, which you're representing and being a man of God first. When you're in the gym and working out, you're representing God first. When you're speaking to people, when you're interacting with others, when you're interacting with uh, especially women and girls, how they should be treated, because data does support, and I've done a lot of research on these things, but about 87% of families who had a father in the home that believed in a religious faith, the family followed suit. 87% of the time, the kids followed the same suit and often followed the same religion. And so dads play an important role here on leadership. And we shouldn't be afraid to be men. We shouldn't be afraid to act like men in those positive ways that a man should act. And we shouldn't be afraid to demonstrate our love for our children and our spouse, and show people how God intended man to be.
Thank you so much. That, like, I could go on probably for a couple hours here in the pub with you, but I think we'll wrap it up there. There's and we definitely need to have another visit, and hopefully face to face one of these days soon.
I would
Uh,
love to be actually sitting in a bar, having a drink with you, having this podcast. So
Well,
that would be even the
let's
best.
see if we can't get the second episode there.
Yeah.
But the term whiskey is from a Gaelic term called Ishkabaha, which means water of life. And I pray that you lead many souls to the true water of life as you continue your journey and your work for the Lord. So thank you for joining us today.
Amen, my brother. Thank you, and thanks for your service, not only to your country, but also to God. I appreciate it very much, and God bless.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us in the pub for this episode of A Dram with Friends. Go to heroicmen.ca to see what we do in this mission, and you can donate there to support stuff like A Dram with Friends. Please like and subscribe on all your YouTube and podcast platforms to help us grow our audience. Thank you, God bless, and have a great day.